The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar, The Impact of IIBA's new BABOK Guide and PMI's new Business Analysis for Practitioners Guide. My name is Michelle and I'll be helping with today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items and let you know how you can participate. This webinar is being recorded, so we will go ahead and send you that link to the recording as soon as it is available. You have joined today's webinar listening through your computer's speaker system by default. If you would prefer to use your telephone, just locate the audio pane and select Use Telephone. The dial-in information and access code will then be displayed. Attendees will be in listen-only mode, but we invite you to ask questions about the presentation using the questions panel. Just type in your question and click send. At the end of the webinar, we will do a Q&A session and take as many questions as possible. Let's continue this conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag BABOKImpact. Now let me introduce you to our presenters today. We have from Durham, Adam McClellan, and from Toronto, Cheryl Lee. Cheryl is the co-author and soon-to-be published book, Effective PMMBA Role Collaboration. She has served as a director for the large IIBA Toronto chapter, where she facilitated CBAT study groups for chapter members, and currently the co-founder of and chair of the PMI Southern Ontario Chapter Business Analysis Branch. Lee is a strong believer of practicing what she preaches and therefore continues to consult as a project manager and business analyst while she teaches project management and business analysis courses at GK. Adam is with us, has more than a decade of experience as a project professional, including stints as a business architect and business analyst. As a project management professional, certified Scrum Master, and Six Sigma Green Belt, he focuses on high-quality solutions and timely delivery to his work, and he has experienced firsthand the valuable knowledge and enlightening conversations to be had at all levels of the organization. So really, really appreciate you guys being with us today. Cheryl and Adam, welcome, and I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Cheryl.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle, for that introduction. So welcome, everyone. Let's go over the agenda items and some of the topics we're going to cover over the next hour. We will start off with some of the recent developments in business analysis, and a lot has been going on within the business analysis community over the last year, and the excitement has not ended yet. A few more things to look forward to by the end of this year. We will then provide an overview of the IIB BABOK Guide, the version 3 or 3.0. We will do a bit of a comparison between version 2 and version 3. We will then cover the overview of the PMI Business Analysis for Practitioners Guide. That was released in December of last year. We will then talk about IIBA's views on business analysis versus PMI's views on business analysis. How are they the same? How are they different? We will then cover some of the trends for the upcoming year. And as Michelle mentioned, we will leave some time for some closing thoughts and some Q&A. So actually, before we start off, I actually want to start with a poll. So Michelle, do you mind prompting that poll? We want to know, who do we have on the line over here? We're interested to see if we have project managers, business analysts, we have a lot of these hybrid PMBAs, or are you none of the above? So you should see the quick poll up on your screen. If you could select one of the options and hit submit, that would be great. All right, so taking a look at the results, it looks like a majority of us are BAs, and close, a very close second, we have hybrid PMBAs over here. Okay, I think that's pretty much who we were expecting to be on the line. Just thought we'd check to make sure. We have a few PMs and a few none of the above. So starting off with the first agenda topic, let's cover some of the recent developments in business analysis. I'm going to take us back to May of last year, so May 2014. This is when PMI launched the Professional in Business Analysis. This is a brand new PMI PBA certification. And you know, it's interesting. When May of 2014, everyone thinks this was the PMI entering the business analysis space, but PMI actually has already been in the business analysis space all along. It's just they've put a lot more emphasis or a lot more investment into business analysis, and a lot of their studies through the PMI Pulse of the Profession reports kind of warranted the extra investment into business analysis. I mean, if you've taken a look at the PMBOK guide, that being the project management body of knowledge, you would have noticed that there is a section in there on requirements management and collecting requirements and so forth. So May 2014 was actually the launch of the pilot for the PMI PBA certification. The pilot lasted between May and August of 2014. I had actually certified during the pilot period. The official launch of the PMI PBA certification wasn't until September of last year is when it really went live. And then in December of 2014, PMI then released the Business Analysis for Practitioners Guide. It was a digital launch at first, the PDF version that is available online. And actually, the PDF version is still available online free of charge for everyone, regardless if you're a PMI member or not. That free download lasts until the end of this month. So if you do not have your copy, I recommend you grab one. And starting in April of 2015, then this was the launch of the BABOK Guide version 3.0. So version 3.0 is actually long anticipated. I think we were expecting it sometime last year, and I know they did a public review process last year. They wanted to make sure that they took the time to incorporate all of the membership's advice and so forth before they did the official launch. So that didn't come out until April of this year. So the items that I have in red on the right side of the screen over here, these are things that we're anticipating by the end of this year. I told you the excitement has not ended yet. So we're anticipating in Q4 of this year the release of PMI's Requirements Management Practice Standard. And I know that seems a bit confusing because I listed in 2014 they released the Business Analysis for Practitioners Guide. So the BA for Practitioners Guide is more of a how-to guide on how to execute business analysis activities, whereas from what I understand, the Requirements Management Practice Standard is going to be more the theory of business analysis. And I have a feeling it's going to be a similar format to the BABOK guide. So the BABOK being more theory-based, kind of the science behind business analysis, where you have the BA Practitioner's Guide is more of a how-to guide. The other thing we have to look forward to, we're anticipating in Q1 of 2016 the IABA exam switchover. I'll address that first item over there first. So obviously in April 2015, the new BABOK guide launched. The exam hasn't switched over yet. Typically there's a 6-month time frame, but we've been told that the 6-month is going to be extended possibly into about a 9-month time frame. It's going to be a little longer. They didn't exactly give us a date yet, but we're anticipating sometime beginning of next year. And the reason for that is with the exam switchover, IABA is going to introduce a new certification roadmap. Now, we don't know what this certification roadmap looks like yet, but from what I've heard, instead of having the CCBA and the CBAP certifications, they're going to guide the, target the certifications to the different levels of business analysis. So someone as a junior BA would be going for, you know, one type of certification, someone who's an intermediate BA, another type of certification, and someone who's more of a senior level business analyst, then they would be going for a different certification. And those who are currently CBAP or CCBA certified, they would be mapped over to whichever the equivalent will be in this new roadmap. Adam, did you have anything to add to this?
I've got lots to add, but it's going to be spoken to on different slides. So I think that's a great overview right there.
Okay, awesome.
So do you want to? So Cheryl, if you want to move us on. So as you see, up next, the IABA BABOK guide overview. There it is in all of its glorious shades of orange, BABOK 3.0. As you can see, it is available as a free download for IABA members. The print copy, and that's the cover of the print copy, is also available for purchase on Amazon. And Cheryl mentioned it's been a long time coming. I think the IABA was really very diligent in putting together a really comprehensive body of knowledge / manual that describes everything that is, I think, part of the core role of the business analyst currently. And if, you know, as those of you who have worked on any sort of standards initiative with BAs know getting BAs to agree on anything is you know, you have to sort of set a relatively inclusive bar for agreement, and it takes quite a while. So I think that's part of why version 3.0 of the BABOK took a while. It really is, it's really quite the work. I mean, as you see here on screen, it's about twice as much content as was in the previous version. Version 2.0 of the BABOK came out in 2009, early spring of 2009. You've got, in general, there's the earlier versions of the BABOK were often criticized for being sort of project-centric, you know, about IT project delivery in particular. And so version 3 of the BABOK really, I think, very nicely goes beyond that. They've added a few key things. The business analysis core concept model, so sort of a different lens for looking at business analysis, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. 15 additional techniques for you to use as needed in the realms of elicitation and analysis and planning and the like. And then also some perspectives on business analysis, and we'll spend some time talking about what those perspectives are in detail. The perspectives that they added were there's Agile, business intelligence, information technology, business architecture, and business process management. Again, intended to go for a broader context of what business analysis is. But more on that shortly. So, Cheryl, awesome. You're one step ahead of me. So for starters, let's do a quick comparison on the knowledge areas that we have in the two versions of the BABOK guide. So the very first one, business analysis, planning and monitoring, you know, the title is the same, pretty much verbatim. This area focuses on how the BA is to go about defining the analysis work to be done and the overall approach to be taken in that work. Really, this section, you know, starting off with the easy one, I guess. This one's largely unchanged. There have been some changes to task names to reflect what I think is a more interactive and collaborative approach. For example, conduct stakeholder analysis. That's the title from BABOK 2. It's now planned stakeholder engagement. You know, I think it's conducting analysis is a little clinical. Planning engagement gets at the interactive nature of the work that business analysts are really called on to do, and also I think to some extent that the more leadership type role that they're called on to play increasingly. So there's that's business analysis, planning, and monitoring. Next one down, elicitation and collaboration, formerly just elicitation. What's happening here? The changes for 3.0. The IIBA has brought in communication activities from the former requirements management and communication knowledge area. So it's a little bit of a hybrid here. Elicitation has been broadened to go beyond just gaining requirements to, it's not just gaining requirements, but now gaining business analysis information in general, you know, including broader contextual information, certain things like risks, constraints, assumptions that are going to inform the project as a whole. There's also a focus on communicating that information, business analysis information more broadly instead of just communicating requirements information. There's also a new task in this area, the managed stakeholder collaboration task. Again, I think this is getting at the collaborative, interactive nature of the work, and again, one of the changes that I've really seen, one of the most pronounced changes that I've seen over the dozen years that I've been doing this is there's an increasing expectation that the business analyst needs to play some sort of leadership role to play the role effectively, and I think this gets at that. Requirements lifecycle management. As I mentioned previously, was management and communication. They've moved the communication activities to the elicitation and collaboration section. The other thing to call out here, it's now requirements lifecycle management instead of just requirements management. That's driving at the fact that requirements have their own lifecycle, and that's not the same as the project lifecycle. Fourth one on the list, you've got strategy analysis, formerly enterprise analysis. The intent has been to broaden the scope of the work. I think enterprise analysis in some cases tended to get pigeonholed as just the pre-project discovery type work, which I don't think was the intent. It's intended to be sort of a broader practice of looking around your organization. In the current strategy analysis knowledge area, it includes the work that the analyst is going to do to understand the current business state, define the target state. So where are you? Where do you want to be as an organization? Put together an approach or a set of approaches to achieve the desired outcomes, and then also to do some risk assessment around the strategy that you've put together. Fifth one, Requirements analysis and design definition. As you see, design definition, we chose that one to put in red to call that out because it is, I think, one of the significant introductions in BABOK 3.0, really calling out the BA's involvement in design activities, which was a little bit blurry in 2.0. So this is important both in the sense that I think it's a clearer expectation of the BA's involvement in design activities, and it also reflects the fact that in many instances the BA is actually expected to provide, if not just direct input into design, they may actually, a BA may actually be called on to create design documentation. Another thing I like in this new knowledge area, there's the concept of requirements architecture, which I think is very helpful when it comes not just to analyzing your requirements, but to managing them. A requirements architecture is essentially a framework that you can use to ensure that the different components of your requirements model cohere into something that actually meets that business need, that all-important thing. And then solution evaluation, formerly the solution assessment and validation. The big change there, it's now focused entirely on evaluating solutions that have already been built, and it may be pre-implementation, it may be post-implementation. There's also a loop. I'll spare you guys my artistic renderings, but there is in fact, I think a good loop back into the strategy analysis and the requirements analysis spaces, and that there are a couple of tasks. One is assessing enterprise limitations. That's 8.4. There's also recommend actions to increase solution value, 8.5. Those are getting at taking a look at a solution that's been delivered and determining, okay, how well is it doing the trick? What sorts of changes do we need to consider, both whether in the solution or in the organization more broadly? What do we need to do to optimize its value? So those are the knowledge areas. I'll hand off back to Cheryl for the core concept model.
Awesome, thanks, Adam. So one of the other new additions to BABOK v3 is this core concept model that we have up on the screen. And I think the way that I'm going to explain this core concept model, because it's new, is use something that's probably very familiar to all of us. Most of us have probably heard of a project management term, the triple constraints. So the triple constraints being the time, cost, and scope, where you impact one, then the others would be impacted, meaning that timelines get slashed, means you have to decrease scope or increase cost. So if you think about that concept, now apply this to this core concept model for business analysis. Now what this means is that one of these core concepts, if there's a change in business needs, and it's going to impact at least one, if not all, of these other categories that we have in here. So I'm going to go into each one and explain it. I will start with the needs, and I'll go up and around clockwise. So starting with needs, this just represents the problems or opportunities that need to be addressed. Changes, by definition, it's the act of transformation in response to a need. Solutions, these are specific ways of satisfying one or more needs in a context. And context, the circumstances that are influenced by and provide understanding of the change. The value is the worth, importance, or usefulness of something to a stakeholder within a context. And stakeholders, obviously the groups or individuals with a relationship to the change, the need, or the solution. So now that we understand which each of these categories are, if we think, if there is a change in, let's say, the stakeholders that are impacted, then there very well could be a change in business needs, which could mean that you may need a different solution to obviously solve for the need, or a different set of changes in order to solve for the need. The needs change, then their stakeholders change, then there could be a different value proposition as well. With the different stakeholders, you could be looking at it from a completely different context. Now these core concepts, they appear throughout the BABOK. So now all of the knowledge areas and tasks within the BABOK guide, they will be revisited in the context of that particular knowledge area or that particular task. So at a very high level, that is the core concept model. Adam, if you have nothing further to add here, I think we're going to move on to the next slide, which is techniques.
Sounds good.
Awesome. So as Adam mentioned earlier, there were additional techniques added to BABOK v3, and there were 15 new techniques. Actually, you know what? I'm going to start at the ends. So starting from the beginning over here, there were 34 techniques in BABOK v2. We ended up with 50 in BABOK v3. So it looks as though there were 16 or so that were added. We did say there were 15 new techniques, and the reason for that is the other additional one here, the data dictionary and glossary, it was actually just split into 2 techniques, so data dictionary being one and glossary being split into another technique. Now the 15 new techniques are listed along the bottom over here, and looking at some of these 15 new techniques, they're actually not necessarily new, a good handful of them anyways. A few of those would be, let's start with decision modeling. So decision modeling was actually part of decision analysis, and then it was pulled out into its own piece. Financial analysis was also part of decision analysis. What else do we have in here? Prioritization. A lot of the different prioritization techniques were actually part of the prioritized requirements task. So if you recall in the old BABOK v2, in the techniques section of each of the tasks, there used to be certain techniques that were listed in there that were only for that used for that technique, and prioritizing requirements being one of them. Another one, if you recall, in conducting stakeholder analysis, we saw a RACI chart as well as things like the stakeholder matrix and the onion diagram. Well, that's what number 14 and 15 are. So instead of having these techniques embedded within the task as well as a whole techniques chapter within the BABOK, what V3 did was they just grouped all of the techniques together in one chapter of the BABOK instead of having them dispersed throughout the book. So it's much more organized. It looks scary that there were 15 new ones added, but to be honest, not so scary at all. One of the cool ones that I think out of this list, I really love number 6, collaborative games. So it's kind of this new trend right now to get out of the boring meeting or the boring elicitation sessions where we sit there and we do this, so what do you guys think, to brainstorm ideas. The collaborative games, they make use of things like using sticky notes and markers, flip charts. You get your participants to move around the room. They can take ownership of some of those requirements. A lot more fun way, I guess, in order to elicit your requirements. And if you're interested in some additional collaborative games, there's a website out there that would be fantastic and can get you started and a lot of great ideas. It's gamestorming.com. So if you want to do a quick Google search for that, for gamestorming, like I said, there's probably hundreds of different collaborative games that you could play on there. Adam, I'm going to turn this back over to you to cover the new perspectives on business analysis.
Okay, excellent. And so, as I mentioned before, BABOK 3.0 has added 5 different perspectives. What is a perspective, you may ask? Well, it is kind of defined. It doesn't, it's not in the BABOK 3.0 glossary, but it does describe that it's essentially, it's something that's used within business analysis work, and this is a quote from the BABOK, to provide focus to tasks and techniques specific to the context of an initiative. Most initiatives are going to engage at least one of these perspectives. Practically speaking, I think of these as being a mix of sort of focus areas for analysis, like business intelligence, information technology, business process management. There's a delivery approach in there, which is agile, of course, and then there's business architecture. On the one hand, it's a little bit of an analysis focus area, but it also has to do with a level of perspective or detail. So BABOK has outlined common themes for each perspective, calling out, all right, where does business analysis fit in? What are some of the underlying competencies? How does each perspective impact the knowledge area, the various knowledge areas? I'll speak to each one of these in relatively short form. It's the last section in the BABOK, and it's good thought-provoking material. It is, again, I think, in part intended as a very appropriate response to the earlier criticism that, okay, what's being described as business analysis is really IT-centric. This is getting at the fact that there are a variety of ways of doing this. So Agile, starting in the top left, real emphasis on not a specific Agile delivery methodology, but that overall flexible mindset aspect of the Agile approach. Part of that flexibility is that as a business analyst, you need to be flexible and adaptive to how exactly how is the business analyst role going to be played on a given initiative. nothing revelatory, nothing brand new, but it does a nice job of summarizing how does Agile impact the role of the BA. One thing to note, the Agile perspective does not take the place of that Agile extension to the BABOK. You may or may not be familiar with the Agile extension that was issued a couple of years back to directly address how Agile impacted the BA's role. That is still valid. It's not going away. If anything, it's likely to be enhanced and come back to later. So it's something to watch for. The business intelligence perspective, focusing on the analyst working in the data space, how do you go about converting data into useful information for business use? Calls out the broader possibilities for the analyst role in that space. You could be playing the typical solution requirements type business analyst. You could be a data analyst who's focusing on source systems data, or a data modeler or a data architect who's putting together data models to represent your desired data structure. Information technology, this is really kind of the classic view of business analysis, focusing on IT project delivery. It is one thing that I'll call out here. It mentions, and this is something that you'll see throughout the BABOK guide, it mentions both predictive and adaptive approaches. Predictive being a waterfall type approach and adaptive being an Agile approach. I think you can kind of raise the question of, okay, going back to that idea of what exactly is a perspective. Should there also be a waterfall perspective, or should you have neither Agile nor waterfall listed as a perspective? Just something to mull over. Business architecture. So business architecture is construed here as being really tasked with aligning the strategic objectives of an organization with its tactics and its operations, not typically tied to a specific initiative, but instead cutting across initiatives. As with any architectural practice, you can do it for the enterprise as a whole or for a subset of that practice. The real emphasis in this section, I think, is the fact that the business architects are working at a higher level of detail, focusing on tying tactical decisions and operational decisions to strategy. As a result, I think the section actually sells short to some extent the degree to which a good business architect has to be conversant in details, being able to focus in on specific details and tie those all the way up to the strategic level as needed. But it still, I think, it still does a nice job of calling out that aspect of the BA role. And then finally, down at the bottom, you've got business process management. That, in turn, is focused on the process-centric view of business analysis. Your Lean Six Sigma, total quality management, all of here. Focused on improving the operational performance of an enterprise. That performance may or may not be enabled by technology. The fact is that a business process management initiative, those of you who are familiar with business process work know this, you're not typically going to dig into a technological solution and changing that solution. You're more focused on how does the business use it's a given combination of enabling tools to get something done, to hit an objective. And so again, that business process management, I think you can look at it as being somewhat one of the key early divergences from the information technology approach that was that again underlay the BABOK in earlier versions. So in total, again, these are the 5 things intended to sort of broaden the BABOK, call out the fact that it's not just intended for information technology related projects in a waterfall context. And I'll send a ding to Cheryl because she's in charge of moving the slides forward.
I think before we move on to the next section, let's just take a look to see if we have any questions that came in.
Sure.
All right, I think I see one over here. If I'm planning to take the CBAP certification exam in Q4 of 2015, should I concentrate on BABOK V2? That is correct. So if you're looking to take it by end of this year, then I would stick to BABOK V2. If you're looking to take it anytime next year in 2016 onwards, then yes, I would be concentrating on V3. Just be careful. I mean, there's enough change between BABOK V2 and V3 that if you're studying V2 and you don't manage to take the exam by the end of this year, it probably will trip you up if you're taking the exam under V3. I know the terminology changes, like when I was reading through BABOK V3, like that stuff definitely tripped me up, and I know it doesn't necessarily change the way that you perform business analysis between V2 and V3, but when you're studying for an exam prep type of course, and sometimes they do test you on the different terminology, you may run into some problems there. So that's just my word of caution, but definitely target to take it by the end of this year with V2.
Yeah, I would echo what Cheryl said. I mean, certification exams are tend to be so picky on terminology and given approaches that if you're looking to take it in Q4 of this year, that'll be V2, but you may want to postpone a thorough reading of V3 until make that your New Year's resolution for 2016.
So we got another one in here. Can you recommend a great organization to teach a BA and get certified? Well, obviously, you want to go to Global Knowledge.
that's clearly a plan.
Here, right? Are there some trainers that are better than others? Well, all of our Global Knowledge instructors, I think, are quite wonderful, and of course, Adam and I are quite awesome as well. And
absolutely, I think you're getting some of the best right here in this webinar. So. And then we've got another one. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Existing CBAP. Yeah. When time comes for recertification, will I need to take a BABOK V3 exam? There was talk of sort of maybe idle chatter, maybe not, of requiring existing CBAPs to recertify because of V3. That has been abandoned. There are no plans to require recertification. There will be some changes to the range of certifications. I think Cheryl's going to speak to that a little later. I won't step on that.
Yeah, we will cover that, I think, again at the end of the webinar. Speak a little bit about the new levels of certification. And again, we don't have a whole lot of information on that right now. But certainly, you will not have to take an exam over. You will have to collect CDUs or continuing development units. You've probably heard of the terminology PDUs on the project management side, which stands for the professional development units. So you will need to collect 60 continuing development units in order to maintain your certification within a 3-year period, but not required to take a recertification exam. Oh, we're getting a lot of great questions right now. Okay, so there's one that we got here. I think I'm going to hold it until after we cover the PMI section. It's about pursuing the BA certification at the PMI or IBA. That's a fantastic one, and I think I'm going to hold that later because we will cover that later on in the presentation.
Okay, and then we've got another one about greater inclusiveness of other disciplines, change management, project management, training and development. Was this the intent of BABOK? Is often on, so again, the question being, there's this crossover to be inclusive of other disciplines. Was this the intent of BABOK? As often on projects, there is a gray area for who has accountability for certain tasks. What's our opinion on this? I do think that BABOK was intended to strengthen the BA role and to call attention to not just what are the classic core activities of a business analyst, but how do those fit into the broader picture. I think, and Cheryl, as always, feel free to disagree with me on this. I think the focus was for version 3 was probably more on differentiating or being more inclusive of the different types of analysts that are out there. Very much a focus on making sure that the BA role is a practical and solid contributor to whatever work is being done, but also going beyond that project context purely to say, okay, here are the different ways that analysts work in an organization. Here's how to be effective in each of those different ways. So I think the PMI guide speaks a little bit more to the effective collaboration in a project context. But
yeah, I'd wholeheartedly agree with you over there, Adam. And I think you will see that when we cover the PMI guide. Just looking at the time, I think why don't we move on to the PMI section, and we will open up a little bit of time for some questions again. And if we didn't get to it right now, we will get to it hopefully by the end of the next section, if not at the end of the presentation. All right? So keep those questions coming, though. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so moving on to the next part of our presentation, which is covering the PMI Business Analysis for Practitioners overview. So the PMI, well, IIBA, we just told you they have 6 knowledge areas within the IIBA. Well, PMI, they have 5 domains of business analysis. And the 5 are up here on the screen, the very first one being needs assessment. The needs assessment, as you can see, the activities related to understanding a business problem or opportunity and evaluating the various inputs to help develop an effective solution. Some of the tasks that you will see as part of the needs assessment include things like obviously defining or reviewing a business problem or opportunity. This is where you would be doing things like conducting root cause analysis to determine the root cause of problems and then trying to develop a need to solve for them. Determining the value proposition of initiatives to ensure that what you're doing justifies the investment that you're spending into it. Aligning the product with organizational goals and objectives. That's all part of a needs assessment here. And we will, I think in the next section, compare the PMI 5 domains to the IIBA knowledge areas. You will see that as I'm going through these tasks, it's probably going to sound familiar. You're going to think, well, wait a minute, this kind of sounds like strategy analysis, and you're absolutely right. This would be mapped to strategy analysis knowledge area for the IIBA. So looking at the second domain that we have here, it's business analysis planning. So this involves the preparation required to effectively manage the business analysis activities that will occur within the project. And some of the tasks or the activities that you will find here, it's things like creating the business analysis plan, which includes a listing of your business analysis activities as well as timelines and estimates to complete them. Working with your project manager to develop a requirements management plan. The requirements management plan is a subsidiary plan out of the project management plan, which is why you would be collaborating with your PM on that. Other things you would be doing in the planning phase, defining a strategy for requirements traceability, determining how you're going to manage changes to requirements, selecting methods for document control, and defining certain business metrics and acceptance criteria in order to pass the requirements on to the next phase. So the next domain that we have, the third one here, is requirements elicitation and analysis. And this is probably the bulk of the BA work or the bulk of the BA activities falls under this category. So this includes requirements management activities, elicitation, analysis, decomposition, acceptance, approval, specification, and validation of the requirements. I mean, that pretty much summarized all of it. But again, you know, you're eliciting, identifying requirements here, you're analyzing, decomposing, and elaborating on those requirements that you've elicited. So typically, I always say elicitation and analysis to be this iterative loop. Elicitation is never, ever one and done. You elicit, analyze, elicit, analyze. You're evaluating product options and capabilities. You're allocating requirements into different releases, especially if you're used to working in more of an agile environment. Requirements allocation probably plays a larger role there. Obtaining sign-off on your requirements as well. Obviously, writing the requirements and then getting sign-off on those requirements is something that happens within this particular domain, and verifying and validating those requirements. Looking at the fourth domain, we have traceability and monitoring, and these are the activities related to managing the life cycle of requirements, continuous monitoring and documenting of requirements, and communicating your requirements to your stakeholders. So as a business analyst, I'm sure we're all aware that once those requirements are signed off, it does not mean that your job is done. This is kind of the stuff that happens after. So for instance, you want to be able to trace your requirements and track the dependencies between your requirements and listing relationships between your requirements. For instance, if I'm going to allocate requirement A into release 1 and A is dependent on requirement B, then both have to be allocated to release 1. You also want to be able to manage changes to your requirements, because once your requirements are baselined or signed off, you very well could receive a new change request form and add some new requirements at that time. So that would be happening within this particular domain, or those tasks would be what's covered here. The last domain that we have is solution evaluation, and this is the assessment of how well the delivered solution fulfills the requirements and meets business needs. So some of the activities or tasks that you would find within that domain include things like the BA role within the testing phase, obtaining stakeholder sign-off on the actual developed solutions. So this is kind of like the acceptance criteria to move over from a project environment over into the operational environment. And another task that kind of has happens, it's often a forgotten task, but it happens after the project has been deployed into the production environment and it's been in use for a certain time period. You want to be able to evaluate that deployed solution to see if you had actually met the business needs that you had identified during the original needs assessment. And if not, then that could very well warrant a brand new project, which means additional elicitation, additional analysis, and it kind of triggers the whole process all over again. So at a high level, those are the 5 domains within the PMI Business Analysis for Practitioners Guide. I'm going to send it back to you.
Thanks, Cheryl. And for those of you who are wondering what the cover of the Business Analysis for Practitioners Guide looks like, that's it right there. This is also available for free, and as Cheryl mentioned before, for right now it's free to anyone. You can go to the link mentioned there, or just go to the PMI site and search for Business Analysis. You can also buy a print copy through the PMI Marketplace. This is, I think it's a really nice volume. It's slimmer than even Babok 2.0. It's focused very much on a typical project lifecycle, so it's a little more linear. Kind of a how-to guide. It's less about the theory of it and much more about the practice. There is also an associated certification that we'll talk about in a little bit. Two things that really, I think, distinguish it. It is full of actual practical examples related to a fictional case study, but still very useful for getting the various techniques that are being discussed, and also multiple collaboration points, and we'll talk about those in turn.
Before we move forward, I just want to bring up one point. So, we do list it's a limited time free download, and limited time, actually, that time expires by the end of this month. So if you're not a PMI member and you want to get a hold of the PDF version of this Business Analysis for Practitioners Guide, I recommend that you download it immediately. The free download will end by the end of June. If you are a PMI member, then you don't have anything to worry about. I mean, you'll be able to have access to this as long as you are a member of PMI.
But that's a great point, Cheryl, because shockingly enough, June is almost done. So right now you've got 5 days, which those of you who procrastinate, that's kind of the danger zone. So if you want this, when this webinar is done, go ahead out to the PMI site and go ahead and download it. It's very much worth the read. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are lots of examples scattered throughout the book. I would say the majority of the techniques, not quite all, but certainly most of them, have some sort of actual sample to demonstrate here's how you would do this. This, of course, is a BA classic use case diagram. The examples that are in the guide, part of what I think makes them useful is that as opposed to being sort of theoretical examples, like, whereas in the Babok you might have something like this, but instead of saying user and reviewer, it would say actor 1, actor 2, and then use case 1, use case 2. The examples tie to a sort of hidden case study. In this case, I think it's a recipe app for a grocery store chain. Another one is processing claims for an insurance company. And obviously you don't have to know the details of how do grocery stores work, how do they feed demand for their products, or how do you process claims, what's an insurance company about. It's just it's enough to know, okay, here are the key concepts, and here's how they would be applied to something specific like a use case diagram, or activity diagrams, state diagrams. In some cases, they'll have sample dialogues to demonstrate, okay, how do you go about doing the 5 whys technique effectively. Again, very helpful, and it's part of what makes this such a practical and useful guide. Then the next point, collaboration points. So there's no collaboration aspect to any of the domains that Cheryl went through. There's nothing that's not formally called out the same way that you have the elicitation and collaboration knowledge area within the Babok. But scattered throughout the book are, throughout the PMI's guide, there are a series of collaboration points. You see one here about how it's helpful for when facilitating workshops. It's a great opportunity for project managers and business analysts to team up, and how the PM may support the effort, and how that allows the BA to do their role more effectively. And what I like about the guide, there are a lot of PM-BA type collaboration points, but it's more broadly, how do you facilitate collaboration within your project team? Like, for example, there's one collaboration point around the business analysis plan, and how it's very helpful to review that plan with the entire team to get a sense of, to get their input for starters, but also for them to take on a sense of ownership, and how that's going to facilitate them supporting the BA, working together as a team to actually execute on that plan. Other points, like I said, multiple potential collaborations with the project manager, tips on how do you work effectively with the systems analyst. Again, very much news you can use, useful information, and I think a real benefit from this guide. Then the last point, and then moving on to the next slide. There it is. There is, I think, part of what makes the guide so useful is that it is very much, it provides a lot of good context, a lot of good information for how to play the BA role actively and constructively. And there is a certain amount of integration between BA areas of interest and PM areas of interest. I think the PMI's interest in business analysis initially emerged in the requirements management space. It is a good example of a place where PM and BA interests align, and so you can see when it's talking about traceability and requirements management, there's a very nice balance of, okay, here's the information that's going to be theoretically useful to the business analyst. From a project manager's perspective and from the project perspective more broadly, though, keep in mind that you don't want to trace just for traceability's sake, just for the fun of tracing. You want to ensure that you are tracing things that actually provide some value to the project overall. And planning activities, it's a similarly strong approach. It really is focused on making the BA an active participant in, collaborator, co-participant in leading the project, rather than just focusing on the theory of it. So going back to that how-to message. So that summarizes the PMI section. We'll move on to the compare and contrast now.
Awesome. So as Adam mentioned, this next section we're going to compare the IABA views versus the PMI's views on business analysis. So this first slide over here, I mean, you see the first bullet. The concepts on business analysis at a high level, they are generally the same. They are identical. They're not saying that from the PMI perspective, like they're doing something completely different over there. But some of the specifics may differ, and unless you take a very close look at both of these guides, you're probably not even going to notice. I've listed a couple of them over here. So like the PMI relationships between requirements, they include things like subsets, implementation dependency, benefit or value dependency, and then whereas the IABA lists there are still relationships between requirements, but they have necessity, effort, value, cover, and subset. So that's different. Other things that I've noticed, this one's a bit of a pet peeve of mine, a little bit of terminology differences. I find that to be a little challenging, and one of the examples I have, I don't have it on the slide, it's on risk management. So within the PMI guide, you'll see the responses to negative risk, avoid, mitigate, transfer, accept, probably something we're all familiar with, and that is common within the new BABOK guide. However, how do we address with the with positive risk or opportunities, we have exploit, enhance, share, accept is probably what I'm familiar with and what I believe to be the industry standard. In the BABOK guide in version 3, the response to opportunities, they just have increase. They don't have any of the other options in there. And I thought that was an interesting decision because in version 2, they actually did have the exploit, enhance, share, accept, and then now they have different terminology. And I think that poses a challenge sometimes when you're working with some of your colleagues, your team members, like working with your project managers who's used to different terminology than what the BABOK is introducing over here. So I mean, I for one with PMI housing, I guess, both business analysis and project management, I'm hoping, and then I think they've shown that they are using common terminology so that it's easier to communicate between the two roles or the two professions. The IABA also has a more holistic and encompassing approach versus PMI's project focus. So the Project Management Institute, they focus on the BA role within the realm of projects and programs. So the IABA, I think that was one of the huge criticisms that they had, not necessarily that they were project focused, but maybe more so that they were IT project focused. But with the new version of the BABOK, you will notice that they are moving away from that. So I guess it's natural that PMI is filling that space to speak to the BA role within programs and projects, and IABA has this higher level, more strategic type of BA function that they're trying to encourage. And PMI obviously focuses on a lot of those integration points with the project manager. I love them. I think they're fantastic. The example that we showed you earlier, the collaboration point on the PM scribing for the VA, I particularly love that one because I know there's a lot of people who still believe that VAs are, glorified secretaries and we're here to take your notes in all your meetings, and obviously we provide a lot more value than note-taking. And what that particular collaboration point is suggesting is that when a VA is facilitating a session, then the PM could assist by freeing up some of that effort and helping with the scribing the same way the VA would help the PM when the PM is chairing a session. So Adam, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Okay, and so quickly on this, thanks, Cheryl. I'm going to hit this slide quite quickly because we are, rapidly running out of time, and there's so much to say on these topics. The upshot here, we've got these 6 knowledge areas mapped to the PMI domains. They map relatively neatly, one-to-one for the most part. As Cheryl mentioned earlier, PMI has combined requirements elicitation and analysis into a single domain, and I think you can make a good case for how the two really are so tightly related. You show them as one. As a result, the 2 knowledge areas, you've got requirements analysis and design definition and elicitation and collaboration. Those 2 more or less map over to the requirements elicitation and analysis domain within PMI. So either way works. You just want to know the distinction between the 2. Back to you, Cheryl.
Awesome. So there was a question earlier on, which certification should I go for, the IABA versus the PMI PBA? So hopefully this slide will help answer that question. The IABA certifications are better for those enterprise BAs or the strategic BAs, the BAs that don't necessarily just work on projects, but they help the organization make decisions on how they should be investing their money on which projects. Full-time BAs, so when we say full-time BAs, it's those that are not necessarily the hybrid BAs, the PMBAs, I guess. I know we have quite a few of those on the call today. And if you are currently CCBA certified, then you're probably more encouraged to go for the IABA certification here. And all of these points here doesn't mean that if you're a full-time BA, you shouldn't go for the PBA, and vice versa. If I'm a project BA, I shouldn't go for the IABA. It's kind of a I think it's just a stronger case to go for one over the other. Now, the PMI PBA, if you are a project-focused business analyst, and going with the Project Management Institute certification makes a bit more sense. If you are that hybrid PMBA, because of the collaboration points and the integration points, if you're already certified under those certifications under PMI, the application process is actually simplified a lot for you guys. The 2,000 project hours requirement is waived. The last thing here, if you're currently a CBAP, then you're also encouraged to go for the PBA since the concepts are generally the same. It shouldn't be much of a stretch for you to study and obtain that PBA certification. So we're going to launch the next poll over here. Michelle, can you help me out with this one? Awesome. So you should see on the screen, which business analysis certificates, if any, are you interested in pursuing? Any of the IABA certifications, and that being the CBAP or the CCBA, the PMI PBA, both? You're already certified, not interested in pursuing any additional ones, or you're not interested in any BA certifications? All right, I see the results. Oh, this is really interesting. So we have actually an even split. Yeah, a dead even split between the IABA certifications and the PMI PBA, so it's 30% each. And we have 20% of you guys that are saying that you're interested in both the IABA and the PMI PBA certifications. That's really interesting. No, not sure what I was expecting there, but yeah, I wasn't expecting it to be so evenly split.
Yeah. I actually would have thought that there would be a little, if you'd asked me to handicap this one, I would have said that I would have put it probably with the IABA certifications having more of an edge. So
yeah, interesting.
Excellent.
All right, moving forward, let's cover the trends for the coming year. So I think, Michelle, the poll is still up. Can we bring it back to the slides? There we are.
There it is.
So trends for the coming year, we've listed a few of them over here. The first one is the need for collaboration between PMs and BAs. So PMI had published a PMI Pulse of the Profession report last year in 2014 on requirements management. And this is where they kind of published the drivers of their certification and the driver of their investment into business analysis, or the added investment into business analysis. Organizations indicate and I'll give you an example of just one off the top of my head. It's on requirements. So project requirements versus product requirements. Obviously, as a BA, you're responsible for the product requirements, and as a project manager, you're responsible for the project requirements, and that being the work that needs to get done in order to execute the product requirements. But you can't have one without the other. So I can't go ahead and elicit product requirements as a business analyst without understanding what these project constraints are. So I do need to understand some of those project requirements. And I cannot determine the project requirements, what needs to be done, unless I understand what those product requirements are. So that requires a very close relationship between the PM and the BA.
It does, and that kind of starts to get into the next point as well, that hybrid PM-BA space. And I think that's something that, in a way, this is something old may new again, because the BA role, in significant part, sort of split off from the project manager role years back. You know, initially the expectation was often that project managers would put together the requirements for a given solution, as well as handle the logistics of delivering that solution. And that's an overloaded plate very often. And so. But I think what's happened is that there is this recognition that it takes a similar skill set to play each role well, and in certain instances on projects that are small enough, you can play both roles well and effectively. I think learning that balancing act, determining what's a situation where you can have someone playing a dual role, playing that hybrid, versus what's a situation where, yeah, it's the same skill set, but you need more resource hours. It's going to take more of someone's bandwidth than they can reasonably deliver just in one person. I think that's one of the things that that organizations will continue to struggle with and learn with. Third bullet point, and I'm going to speak somewhat quickly because I would like us to get to one or two more questions if possible. As Cheryl mentioned, PMI is continuing to invest in business analysis, throwing some love the BA's way. The requirements practice standard is going to be released this fall, and it'll be interesting to see, where does the PMI go from there. I think a lot will have to do with how receptive, how much uptake is there of the PMI PBA certification. One other thing, and this actually gets to a question that was posed earlier, is another thing to watch is there's also a business architecture guild who have released what's called the BizBoK. Recently updated. I think that is, the perspective in BABOK 3.0, the business architecture perspective, speaks to that a little bit, but by no means exhaustively covers that ground. I think in general, the relationship between business analysis and the various architecture practices, that's a lot of very fertile ground to be. So I'm mixing my metaphors, but I'll play it all the way through. Fertile ground to be mapped there. Lots of stuff to be learned. So. I think what's in BABOK 3.0 is a good start there, but that is by no means the last word on this subject.
Great. The last thing that we have over here is the IABA's new certification roadmap. So again, there's a lot of uncertainty as to what this looks like. We haven't been communicated what this looks like yet, but like I said, it's probably going to be, it sounds like it's going to be three-tiered. I'm a little apprehensive of it. Being CBAP certified, I'm a little curious as to where they're going to map the CBAP, if it's going to be the intermediate or if it's going to be the senior level. If they map me at the intermediate, I mean, that implies that I have to go for another certification there. And, I'll be honest, if that's the case, if I was someone who had to go for another certification, and it kind of opened the door for me to investigate would I want to go for the PBA. And right now, this is the huge debate, and this is why I found it really interesting that it was split between PMI and IABA. And I think Adam's comment around we're surprised that the IABA didn't have an edge over PMI. And the only reason why we're surprised is the IABA is more familiar territory for business analysts just right now in today's world. But I mean, the sheer size of PMI, and I, for one, as a BA practitioner, I am very excited that PMI has so-called invested into the business analysis space, or put more emphasis on business analysis to kind of shine the light on the role and to show the importance of business analysis. Quite frankly, there are a lot of project managers out there who still do not fully understand or embrace the BA role, and they still do treat a lot of their BAs like their glorified secretaries to do a lot of the dirty work. And, you know, we can provide a lot more value to the table than simply taking your notes. So with that being said, we've only got a minute or so. I mean, I can stick around a little bit later. Michelle, how did you want to tackle this? Should we take a couple questions now? And
So sure, let's. We've got one question, which is, why would someone want both certifications? And I think in some cases it's just nice to have an extra string of letters to add at the end of your name. In some cases it may be, I think the BA certifications are becoming more recognized, somewhat more important. Not typically something that's going to get screened for when you're applying for jobs, that sort of thing. So I think it's one of those things where for some people, going for a certification is a good way of forcing yourself to encounter the material and sort of internalize that knowledge. If that's the way you learn, then I think going for both certifications could be worthwhile. Or if you wanted to teach classes related to those two certifications, another good reason there.
yeah, you also have to remember, again, like when we talked about the difference between the two different approaches. So if you do work on projects a bit more and focus on the integration points between project management and business analysis, and you work maybe more as a hybrid PMBA, then I would probably see a bit more benefit maybe as going for the PBA certification. Maybe not right at this moment because it is so new, but I can certainly see this as a growing trend, and we can talk again a couple years from now and see where this all goes. But the level of investment that PMI is putting into this, like, I have a feeling it's going to take off fairly soon.
I think so.
All right, I think that's all the time we've got for today. We do have several questions that are coming in that we haven't been able to get to. So what I can do is, Cheryl and Adam, I'll send these to you, and we can send them out to the whole group after the show or after the webinar is complete. That works for everyone.
Yeah, that works for me. And if you guys didn't manage to take down my Twitter account, we can certainly continue the conversation on Twitter as well. I think I scheduled a tweet to go out with the link to the download for the PMI practice guide if you didn't catch that link earlier. So my Twitter account is @BAPM Cheryl Lee.
Yep, and we will send everyone a link to this recording as soon as it becomes available. But appreciate everyone joining. Thanks so much, Adam and Cheryl. That was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Much appreciated.
Thanks everyone.